Hi, my name is Daniel Burrus, author of the New York Times bestseller Flash Foresight, and I'm here with a very special guest that I just can't wait to interview. I had a chance to meet him about a month ago, had a wonderful discussion at dinner with him, and I thought, I got to share him and his ideas with all of the people that tap into me on the web. And Peter Lambrou is the author of a new book. He's several books in the past, but his new book, just out this week, is Code to Joy. And the connection is that I've spent most of my professional life writing and speaking about helping people to shape a better future for their organizations and for themselves. And this is where there's a perfect link. And one of the concepts that I've shared over the years is the concept of future view, and that's the future tie-in. You see, how you view the future does shape how you act in the present to a tremendous extent. And how you act in the present, of course, shapes your future. Therefore, your future view will determine the future you. So one of the things I loved about Peter's work is that he talks about how you can adjust in the present your own view and your notions of yourself to alter that view of the future and therefore your future. And what I'm going to do is let Peter talk a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about you, and then I'd love to hear about this great book he just came out with.
Thank you very much, Dan. Well, as a clinical psychologist for the last 25 years, I've been looking for and working with different processes to help people improve their lives and improve their outlooks, improve the quality of their relationships, and to do it in an effective way, in as rapid a way and a safe way as possible. But before that, I actually had another career in the business world. So I know don't look that old, but for 15 years, I was in the business world as a sales representative for two large corporations, and then had my own marketing consulting firm, and eventually wrote some books with some psychologists. That got me into psychology, and I went back to graduate school and postgraduate school to learn more about psychology, and got hooked on the clinical side of it, and that took me in that direction. But even among all those twists and turns, I've remained a businessman at heart. And in fact, I have a weight loss program, a weight loss business that I also run, as well as my clinical practice. So it's been a unique blend of business and psychology, and the ability to understand human relationships both at the interpersonal level and at the business level.
Well, Peter, that's one of the exact reasons why I love talking with you and wanted to share your expertise, because it's not very often that you find someone that has the psychology component and the sales background and the entrepreneurial business background. So I saw a very opportunity. Tell me what you're seeing, and tell me a little bit about the book. What can the readers, because I want to encourage people to read this, what should they know about the book?
I think one of the things, and what brought us together was I love some of the elements in your book and ours overlap so wonderfully. And one of those is the part that you talk about where our vision or our perceptions of the future drive our choices and our behaviors. And you were talking about that a few moments ago. But many people have what we call scotomas, or blind spots. It's the unawareness of something that's interfering in your life. And one of those kinds of scotomas or blind spots are the beliefs that develop from you're not aware of. Someone has a major trauma, act of war, violence, serious life-threatening illness or injury. We know those are major traumas. We call it PTSD, and we recognize they have an impact. But what people don't recognize are the micro traumas, what we call micro traumas of life. And these are the experiences that we might pass by and not even realize have developed or helped to impact and shape our view of the world. And if our view of the world, or of reality, one might say, is distorted, and that's what Code to Joy really helps people do, is change those unproductive life beliefs, or what we call limiting life beliefs, in a direction that allows them to be more effective and be able to see the future.
Well, one of the subtitle of Flash Foresight is how to see the invisible and do the impossible. And a lot of the things that are keeping us from solving our problems or from moving forward are invisible to us. And again, what I tried to do in my book, and I actually believe you're trying to do in yours in a very different but synergistic way, is to make that invisible visible. And often, I think a lot of the things that affected us when we were young are keeping you from selling more, are keeping you from doing better business, much less having a better relationship. So I think this is very germane. Tell me just a little bit more.
Well, take an example. We're talking micro traumas, and some people might wonder, what is a micro trauma? And there's different forms. Let me give you a couple of examples. One fellow, his name is Carl, came to see us, and he came from a troubled family. His father moved away when he was very young. He had two sisters, and he grew up really without a role model and without structure, and he got into a lot of fights. He got into some problems with the law, some minor shoplifting things. His mom really was overwhelmed and unable to provide the guidance. So these were repeated. The absence of his father, the absence of structure, really were what we might call micro traumas to his life. One day, however, his mother, exasperated and unable to help Carl, when Carl came home from school that day, his mother and his two sisters had moved out, literally moved out of the house, out of the apartment. And fortunately, he was able to go and stay with a nearby aunt for a few days until his mother finally came around and said, "I hope you've learned your lesson." The lesson that Carl learned wasn't what mom intended. What he really learned was not to trust. He learned not to trust others, but also he learned not to trust himself because he didn't see this coming. He didn't understand this whole process. I mean, he was only 14. Well, let's flash forward for a moment. And 40 years later, Carl is now an executive of a large architectural design company. He's a senior partner. However, his inability to trust his partners, inability to trust himself is limiting his business, is limiting their ability to see what is ahead in terms of their industry and their company and their future. And he's holding them back. Well, after going through the four-step process to get through and break through those old beliefs, he was able then to really see what, you might say, he could see what was invisible to him and be able to start to respond to the impacts in his industry and look ahead to do what he needed to do. So that's an example of one form of micro trauma. You know, and I want to just make a comment about trust here for a moment, because you make a reference in your book to a story about Jerry Coffey, I think it is, a Vietnam vet that shot down, 7 years imprisoned. And sometimes people, even with a major trauma, which clearly that is, are able to overcome it, are able to get past it and see reality. And I think you go on to tell a story about how he now goes around and talks about the prisons that people have by their limitations that limit their view of reality. Well, he's right, spot on. When we have limitations of that sort, it will change our reality. And trust being one of those things I think you talk about as a high value element, being able to trust others and being able to trust yourself is critically important. And that's one of the things that happened to Carl and how he was able to overcome it.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that you can't by yourself, after hearing this interview, just say, well, I'll think of all the things that are invisible to me and work on them, because they're invisible to you. You need a tool, you need help, you need something. Now, some people get that help by going to a counselor, although many people think that you have to be crazy to go to a counselor. And my suggestion is to think of counselors more as a coach that can help you to find that invisible and make it visible so you can move on. But for those of us that don't feel that we have time to see a counselor or don't feel like we're ready to take that step, and again, I'm thinking of it more as a life counselor than a psychologist, but in reality, I think they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. I think that this book is a great way to start, because you're not actually signing up for a counselor, but you have you, who has been in business sales, and a world-class counselor who has given us not 50 steps, thank you, 4 steps that can help me to uncover those things. Because, you know, we don't even know what's really working under the surface. And if we did, we would disagree with them. we would say to ourselves, well, that's not true. I don't believe that. But yet they're causing our actions to determine our future. And they're invalid, even according to us. We just don't know it. So once again, we need some tools to help with that. I think the book provides some really nice tools for that.
You make a very good point about the inability to see the impact of what consciously we believe is no longer true. And our conscious mind is very powerful and certainly has a very wonderful capability of being creative and innovative and so forth. But we talk about something, the flea and the elephant. And the flea, imagine for a moment that the flea is on top of an elephant and the flea, the conscious mind, wants to go somewhere. How much impact do you think the flea is going to have on the elephant? Well, if the flea wants to go north and water for the elephant is south, you know where they're going. They're going south. So the conscious mind has this capability, but without the support or the cooperation of the subconscious mind, it may be limited in how far or where what direction it goes in. So what we've done is we've provided to help people understand what those self-limiting beliefs are, is we provided a personal belief assessment tool. And it's a series of activities that people go through and identify those micro traumas in their life. And we've given people dozens of probable life-altering micro traumas, not the major traumas so much, because those are the ones everyone can see quite easily. It's the micro traumas that get in the way. And let me give you another example of a micro trauma, how subtle they can be. This is another person who came in to us, and this is Stephanie. Stephanie is a 52-year-old woman, very powerful. She owns a large PR firm and has really done very well in life up to this point. But she's starting to make really poor decisions because her customer base has become like friends and family. And while you might say, well, that's great, such a great customer base that are loyal and close relationship and feeling good about each other. Let me go back now, flash backwards for a moment. And when Stephanie was a child, she went over to her aunt's one day. And she was a little kid, and she was helping her aunt do some chores around the house. Her aunt gave her a quarter, which going back in those days was a lot more than, a quarter a dollar would be today. But it was really important to Stephanie because of the first time she'd made any money. So this little girl runs home, and she's so proud. She shows her mom and dad this quarter and goes, look what Aunt Annie so far has given me. And Dad and Mom, instead of going, wow, that's wonderful, honey, that's terrific for you, they berated her for taking money from, you said, you don't take money from family or friends. Don't you know that? Well, little Stephanie was just devastated. I mean, she felt humiliated. She felt like embarrassed and shameful that she had done something so wrong that she thought was so right. So years go by, and you'd say, well, that was water under the bridge and big deal. Except that it had imprinted on her so powerfully that taking money from family and friends is wrong. It changed her relationship, her business relationships, so that she was no longer charging people the way she should, because after all, they were friends, almost like family. And her decisions were becoming altered. Her judgment was becoming distorted because of this belief, this faulty and misunderstood belief that you shouldn't take money from family and friends, which Mom and Dad probably had a good intention there, but they didn't realize the impact of this single experience